Namaste, and welcome to this short talk about the name I am that I am as part of the series World of Words. The name I am that I am, in Hebrew Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, features in the Torah in Exodus 3:14, and it is God's answer to Moses when Moses asks for his name. Now, as a description, I am that I am, of course, reminds one of the advaitic non-dualism. It reminds one of Krishnamurti's That Which Is, and even of the contemporary Living in the Now. Now, Kabbalistically, all these ideas and concepts are entailed as well, but there are more implications, of course, because of the numerical implications and the linguistic implications that Kabbalah works with. Now, firstly, the name Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh is ascribed to one of the Sephirot, namely the first Sephirah, divine emanation of the Godhead. Now, as such, it stands at the beginning of the Tree of Life, which is the commemoration of the 10 Sephirot, the 10 divine emanations. As such, it heads all of existence and it heads all of creation. Now, this first Sephirah Keter, the crown, has as its numerical value 620. Kabbalistically, this is important and interesting because it is twice 310. Now, the meaning of this is that 310 is the numerical value of the word yesh, denoting existence. Also, it is the numerical value of the root for to think or thought, machshava, thought, the root chashav. Chashav also having the numerical value 310. Now, as such, we see that Keter, as the first of the divine emanations, already entails some kind of doubling, that is the doubling of the number 310, making for the 620 of Keter. Meaning that this name that is ascribed to Keter, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I am that I am, also entails some kind of doubling. Now, there are many different ways of looking at this. In Kabbalah, this doubling, this reflection, is often looked upon as an expression of two kinds of thought. Because in Kabbalah we have higher thought, usually called wisdom, chokhmah, and we have lower thought, which is the thought kind of in this world. So lower thought usually looked upon as discursive thought, whereas higher thought then is received thought, so a more direct, describing a more direct connection with the Godhead. In Krishnamurti's terminology, these two kinds of thought would be horizontal thought and vertical thought. Vertical thought being higher thought in Chokhmah. Now, as such, we see that Keter entails a dichotomy, or a dualism, or a reflection of 2 times the 310, which of course we see in the name I am that I am as well, since I am features twice. Now, the twice featuring of I am is also important on its own. I am has the numerical value 21. And because it features twice, I am that I am. Also the number 42 as part of creation, as part of the, or as a parallel to Keter, where we also have twice the 310. The number 42 is related to creation, which is thoroughly dualistic, thoroughly dualistic concept. Now, the 42 is important because of this reason, and it is also used as the 42-lettered name. Now, there are many divine names in the Torah. In English, we have the Lord and God, but in the original Hebrew version of the Torah, we have many different names. Each Sephirah has its own name ascribed to it. So there are the names like El, like Jah, like Elohim, like Shaddai, etc. But there are also more esoteric names. Now, the 42-lettered name is a more esoteric name. The 42-lettered name ends with another reference to a doubling or dichotomy. It ends with the words chaos and void, and chaos and void here being more archetypal reflections of, say, darkness and light, for example. Or in Hinduism, Shiva and Shakti. Now, the name, this 42-lettered name, starts, of course, then with the first word of the Torah. Now, the first word of the Torah, Bereshit, is usually explained or translated as in the beginning. But if we look more closely, the word for, or the letter for in, bereshit, in the beginning, has the numerical value 2. Again, referring to something that's doubled, or a dichotomy, however you want to phrase that. The rest of the word, reshit, in the beginning, has as its core rosh. Rosh means head. As such, in the beginning comes from the word head, the head of something. However, the word rosh has 3 letters, resh, aleph, shin, that are also the same 3 letters that are the middle part of the name I am, that I am, ehiyeh, asher, ehiyeh. The asher has the same letters. Now, if we keep in mind this idea of reflection, of doubling, then the first ehiyeh, the first I am, would be the reflector. The second ehiyeh would be the reflection. As such, the asher in between is actually the mirror. Now, we see this come back in the first word of the Torah, bereshit, which as its heart has that same mirror. As such, bereshit, in the beginning, really metaphysically is not a time expression. It's not an expression of time at the beginning of time like that, but is the reflection of a metaphysical process that creates time, namely the mirror or God's thought. So in that sense, again, even at the beginning of the Torah, we find a doubling or a reflection. Now, in Kabbalah, of course, these kinds of things, the reflection and the reflectors, are also expressed through ratios and through words that are exactly numerically twice the numerical value of another word. So, for example, the Exodus, where the people of Israel went from Egypt to Canaan, the Promised Land, in this case expressing, Kabbalistically more expressing the pathway, each person's pathway from a dual state of mind to a less dual state of mind, implying really identification with the I thoughts and not the identification of the I thoughts. Now, the two main concepts here in this story, Egypt, in Hebrew Mitzrayim, and the Promised Land Canaan, numerically also exactly have that ratio 1 to 2. It's 190 and 380 are the numerical values. So this concept of the doubling expresses itself throughout the Torah in ratios, but also in the orders of letters, because each letter, of course, has a numerical value, where letters are doubled. Sometimes words are doubled to express that same reflection. Now, why we're talking about reflection and not just about creation is a bit of a philosophical topic, which is discussed in most main religions in the world. Of course, a lot of it is being written in advaitic literature as well about the same concept. The idea is that if we think of God as a one, and we think of creation as a dualistic concept, then the question is, how can the two, the dualistic concept, come forth from something which is supposed to be entirely one? Because this implies, if it goes forth from the one, that the two is already entailed in that one, hence turning it into a two. Now, this is a philosophical discussion, but it goes back to the idea of creation not actually being something that goes forth from something, but something that is the reflection of something. Now, in one of the oldest books of classical Kabbalah, Sefer Yetsirah, we find this idea already expressed in a slightly different way. Here, creation is many times expressed by the doubling of specific words, like the breath from the breath, the light from the light, etc. But also by the use of verbs that don't describe a forthgoing from a source. So, for example, at the beginning of Sefer Yetsirah, in its first chapter, we find the verbs chatzav, to hew, and to chisel as well. Chakak and chatzav, so two verbs that actually describe some kind of metaphysical process of taking something out of something else. So not the coming forth, but taking something out, making a place, making a space for creation to be. And in that process, creation is hewn out of nothingness, you can phrase it like that. Sefer Yetsirah, of course, goes further with more linguistic considerations about, for example, the letters in the Hebrew alphabet that have two different pronunciations, also expressing that same concept of reflection. Other books, like the Zohar, for example, uses the terminology of a kind of retreat, which we also find in Lurianic Kabbalah, where God is said to retreat. The retreat itself is the first thought, and the thought entails language, and the language then expresses itself as divine action, which is also again expressed by divine names, because Kabbalistically all divine names are actually actions, they're not proper names. Now, this is all a bit Kabbalistic, of course, but in more common terminology, we find the same ideas, of course. As a person, we only start to develop when we start self-reflecting, when we start looking at our own thoughts. Kabbalistic, again, or mystically in general, described as a process where we move away from the identification with our thoughts, the perfection of which would be the total perfection is a bit of a weird word here, but the goal maybe also not the right word, but just to express this idea, the goal being the total non-identification with I thoughts, which of course is also beautifully expressed by the phrase, there is no thinker, there is only thought. That would be then the epitome of that state of mind. So all these ideas, of course, again, in many religions, human is a reflection of the Godhead. So in Kabbalah, we have Adam Katmon, original man, being androgynous, not man-male, but man as an expression of other concepts. And hence, what happens at the beginning cannot but reverberate throughout of all of existence, including our lives, our bodies, our thoughts, etc. So such self-reflection, human self-reflection, goes back on divine self-reflection, as we find it in the name I am that I am. Now, the mirror there, Asher, sometimes seen as the head, sometimes also seen as the divine word, speech, because of course we're talking about linguistic mysticism. So when God says, let there be light, and there is light, it's not so much that that light goes forth from something, it's literally that the speech, the voice, the divine voice is the mirror, and as a result of that the light comes into being. So it's the activation of things that are up to that point only present in potential. Now all of this is contained in the name Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh, because it's the first name. Hence everything else flows forth from that name, that first expression of reflection, actually even inverted or inversed reflection. Now, even on the text level of this little phrase of Exodus 3:14, we find that same idea, because Moses in Hebrew is Moshe, Mem Shin He, and what he tries to find out is the name of God. In Kabbalah, the name and God are considered to be exactly the same thing. So he's trying to find the name. Now the name is Ha-Shem. Ha emphasized because it's the name. Now Hashem has exactly the same letters as Moshe, as Moses. As such, we are reminded of the fact that somebody who searches for God or searches for the divine or searches for a less violent way of living is reminded of the fact, that person is reminded of the fact that actually he is or she is already God, because we are contained, we are made up by exactly the same elements in Kabbalah, the same letters, which are the elements of creation. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say about Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh, I am that I am. Of course, the name itself has many more branches that we could go into, but maybe that I'll do that some other time. I hope this was interesting, and have a lovely day. Namaste.